What if the chaos on the ground wasn't a breakdown of authority but evidence, meticulously gathered and waiting to be used? This is the story of a high-stakes confrontation where time, not force, became the decisive weapon, and every public act of defiance was carefully documented to build an unshakable legal case. The scene in Minneapolis appeared to be one of sheer disorder. Streets were flooded with tension, federal agents found themselves isolated, and leaders were entrenched in a very public blame game. For many Americans watching, a pressing question emerged. Why didn't the president step in immediately? To understand this, we need to name the key figures. Donald J. Trump occupied the White House. Tim Walz led the state of Minnesota. Jacob Frey was the mayor of the city. And overseeing it all was the Department of Justice, observing, documenting, and choosing its words with extreme care. At its core, this was never just about immigration enforcement. It was a fundamental test. Could local authority openly defy federal law and face no consequences? For years, Minneapolis and Minnesota's broader leadership operated under a powerful assumption that federal immigration law was optional, negotiable, or politically unenforceable. This assumption bred overconfidence. The behavior of Jacob Frey and Tim Walz reflected this. They didn't whisper or hedge. They spoke openly, publicly, and repeatedly, issuing guidance, signaling resistance, and framing federal enforcement as illegitimate. This is not how people act when they believe accountability is imminent. This is how they act when they believe they are insulated. In the video clip, this speaker said that labeling federal agents an occupying force was not mere rhetoric. When thousands of IC and Border Patrol personnel enter a city, accompanied by military threats and vastly outnumber local police, that is precisely the atmosphere it creates. The speaker argued that if the goal were public safety, this was not the way to achieve it, and that the antidote to violence would be for those federal forces to leave. This sanctuary policy bubble made federal pushback feel theoretical. Minneapolis leadership assumed Washington would only posture, issue statements, or perhaps sue, but never truly escalate. They believed political pressure would always outweigh legal enforcement. That belief caused them to overplay their hand. They didn't hide coordination. They normalized it. They didn't deny obstruction. They reframed it as a virtue. That wasn't chaos. It was a critical miscalculation. In the video clip, this speaker said that local leadership instructed citizens to call 911 if they saw ICE officers, but did not give the same instruction if citizens saw those ICE officers being assaulted. The speaker noted that police were conspicuously absent around ICE facilities and operations, a stark contrast to the support federal officers typically receive from local law enforcement nationwide. The speaker emphasized this was not an indictment of the rank-and-file police, but of the leadership directing them, and that is why the president was examining all available options. This dynamic only works if it isn't interrupted. Early intervention by the White House might have felt decisive, but legally it could have been destructive, collapsing the very evidence needed to prove intent. The administration didn't need speed, it needed documentation. By waiting, they avoided giving critics a narrative that federal intervention was the provocation. Instead, they let local leaders operate under their own words and orders. There was no coercion, no entrapment, just observation. While critics shouted about inaction, the Department of Justice was watching officials speak publicly, issue guidance, and direct behavior in real time. Every press conference, every instruction, every refusal to cooperate became self-guided evidence. This felt slow, not because of hesitation, but because of legal patience. Then the entire case flipped on one word: conspiracy. Not protest, not disorder. When the Department of Justice centers an investigation on conspiracy, the scope changes instantly. The question shifts from whether laws were broken in the heat of the moment to whether actions were coordinated, premeditated, and shared across actors. Conspiracy unlocks powerful legal tools, widening subpoenas, stretching timelines backward, and making communications between offices and agencies fair game. It is the difference between reacting to chaos and proving intent. And intent is what courts care about. Once that word entered the conversation, the question stopped being about what happened in Minneapolis and became about who coordinated it and why. Tim Walz and Jacob Frey didn't just fail to assist federal authorities. They spoke and acted in ways that signaled active resistance. Public statements framed immigration enforcement as illegitimate. Guidance encouraged distance, not cooperation. This matters legally because intent can be inferred from consistent public conduct. When leaders repeatedly tell their institutions and constituents to stand down or obstruct, that creates a pattern. And patterns are what prosecutors build cases on. In the video clip, this speaker said that the governor and mayor were actively encouraging individuals to impede ICE officers, which is not allowed under federal law. The speaker stated that federal officers must be allowed to do their jobs, and it was horrible that federal officials had to publicly tell a mayor and governor to stop encouraging such obstruction. The speaker concluded that no one, whether a governor, mayor, or someone on the street, can legally impede a federal officer, and the public can see what the mayor and governor have been saying. Each public statement narrowed plausible deniability. Each directive reduced the ability to claim later there was a misunderstanding. By choosing visibility over caution, Walz and Frey made the record cleaner for investigators. They believed public pressure would shield them, but instead it clarified motive. What looked like disorder on the streets became a timeline of actions, omissions, and decisions. Every blocked roadway, every delayed response, every moment federal officers were left without support created a data point. The disorder wasn't the problem, it was the proof. Once subpoenas go out, the dynamic shifts completely. It stops being a political standoff and becomes a legal process with its own momentum. Subpoenas expand the discovery blast radius. Emails, texts, call logs, internal guidance, coordination with outside groups, everything becomes discoverable. For the DOJ, subpoenas are a commitment, signaling the evidentiary threshold has been met. From that point, delay favors the government. Each response creates new leads. Each omission raises new questions. Public messaging no longer controls the story. Documents do. Minneapolis was not chosen as a target because it was weak, but because it was representative. It had a long-standing sanctuary posture, vocal political leadership, organized activist infrastructure, and a public willingness to challenge federal authority. If federal law could be enforced here cleanly and with documented intent, it could be enforced anywhere. Minneapolis became a proving ground. The more complete the record built there, the more transferable the legal theory becomes to other cities. Behind the scenes, agencies like ICE, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security align their efforts in a disciplined, coordinated manner, operations, intelligence, and legal integrity moving in parallel without competing for headlines. By the time public attention noticed an escalation, the enforcement framework was already firmly in place. In the video clip, this speaker said that immigration is the heart of the Democratic Party's political power, a scheme for mass migration that secures their power today and into the future. The speaker argued that local leaders sanction violence against ICE because they understand that if the administration successfully reverses what they call an invasion, it would deal a generational blow to Democrat political power. This underscores why the political stakes were so high. Immigration enforcement reshapes power, affecting census counts, electoral college votes, and congressional representation. Sanctuary states benefit from population numbers that may not reflect lawful residency. If enforcement succeeds in a place like Minnesota, the downstream effects are structural, not just symbolic. The resistance wasn't just about ideology, it was existential for that political leverage. Critically, there was no entrapment. Donald J. Trump did not compel Tim Walz or Jacob Frey to speak or act as they did. They chose visibility. They chose defiance. They chose repetition. Every choice narrowed their legal defenses. Public statements removed ambiguity. Consistent posture removed plausible deniability. What might have been framed as confusion became a clear pattern. By exercising restraint, the administration didn't escalate the situation. It clarified it. And once clarified, accountability becomes a matter of process. In the video clip, this speaker said that agencies are digging into the groups organizing the obstruction, identifying ringleaders to bring them to justice. The speaker also noted that these groups are targeting not just federal agents but also American citizens they mistake for agents, damaging their vehicles and slashing tires. The speaker added that the perpetrators are live streaming their actions, taking pride in showing them to the country. The entire arc of Minneapolis only makes sense when you understand that time was the strategic weapon. Every extra day allowed intent to harden, patterns to emerge, and defenses to erode. What looked like hesitation was inevitability taking shape. President Trump didn't need to prove outrage. The public already felt it. He needed proof. Clean, durable, and immune to political spin. Proof requires space for people to keep talking after they should have stopped, to keep issuing guidance after warnings were clear. Minneapolis thought it was untouchable. That very belief created the record. Walz and Frey didn't stumble into exposure. They walked into it. And once the documentation existed, the outcome became a matter of legal process, not politics. That is what being 10 steps ahead actually looks like, not reacting to chaos, but letting it reveal the truth.